Hello friends, this is your friend back with a new fanfic. Naruto moves on and grows stronger. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's start. Naruto breathed a weary sigh as he walked down the streets of Konoha. The day of D-ranked missions had been exhausting. The sheer boringness of the missions seemed to wear him down quicker than usual. He was certainly relieved and glad he was finally dismissed for the day. Something about his team bothered him though. Or more specifically, Sakura did. He had noticed that his pink-haired teammate had been acting somewhat strange lately while in his presence. He had tried to observe the girl, but never managed to understand her recent behavior. She would occasionally sneak glances at him, but when he would voice his concern, she denied that there was anything wrong. And she would always look away when he met her glances. He did not know what it meant and what caused it. He was certain it was not due to his growth in power. He had yet to show anyone on his team his true strength. It wasn't because he was trying to hide his strength from his team, but it was simply because he never needed to show any kind of skill in D-ranked missions. But then, while it puzzled him, he didn't feel that it was especially important. At least not at the moment. Like he had for most days, he had bid his team goodbye and was about to head out for his daily training after he went home for some training equipment. He certainly wasn't expecting to find Kurenai coming out of Konoha's best dango shop with a female companion. He easily recognized the genjutsu specialist from the distinctive bandage-like red and white clothing she wore. He did not recognize her companion though. He had never met a woman before. She was an attractive woman with purple hair tied up in a bunch with some of her hair sticking up at odd angles. Naruto judged her to be several years or so younger than the genjutsu specialist and wore a tan-colored coat over a fishnet undershirt. He took in a breath and quickly thought to himself whether to approach Kurenai or not. He decided that this was probably the best chance for him to approach Kurenai for training. He let the breath out and immediately called out to the woman before she got too far away. "Kurenai-sensei." The red-eyed beauty paused in her walk and turned her head to the source of the call. Her eyes widened slightly when her eyes made contact with the boy whom was waving to get her attention. My god, he looks just like the Yondaime. Kurenai blushed faintly as she reminisced her younger days when she had a crush on the blonde Hokage. It was hard not to like the Yondaime. He was a great man, kind, strong and good-looking. He had many of the traits that she looked for in a man. Though her crush was short-lived as it had ended when the man had died defeating the Kyuubi. Simply looking at the boy brought back flashes of memories of Yondaime. She pushed those memories to the back of her mind, content in letting the past remain in the past. After all, a crush was just that. A crush. She turned and straightened herself and watched as the boy slowly approached them. She focused her deep red eyes onto the boy and took in a better look. She instantly recognized the blonde-haired boy as the Kyuubi container despite the change of clothing. Curiosity flashed within her mind as she wondered what business the boy had with her. She had seen him several times when she still taught at the academy. She had heard about the boy from her colleagues, but she never knew him personally. Naruto looked up into Kurenai's piercing red eyes as he approached. Beautiful. He couldn't help but to think. It was perhaps one of the most beautiful sets of eyes he had ever seen. Not only because of the exotic shade of red of her eyes, which gave her an aura of mysteriousness and intrigue, but also because of the underlying warmth in her eyes that betray the cold, dispassionate image that she tried to portray with her indifferent expression. He could easily see the kind, caring nature of the woman underneath. And it made her all the more attractive. Naruto couldn't help but be mesmerized. You're Naruto-kun, right? He blinked, finally breaking eye contact. He quickly regained his bearings and hastily filtered through his mind her question, having almost missed it. Even as her question finally sank in, he could only nod dumbly at her, not knowing what to say. He could feel his face heating up and he tried desperately to hide his blush by looking at the ground. The shyness of the boy almost brought a smile to Kurenai's face, though she quickly hid it. He almost reminded her of her student Hinata. So, how can I help you, Naruto-kun? Kurenai asked, breaking the silence. Feeling the warmth in his cheeks starting to fade, he looked back up at her face. Unsure how to phrase his request, Naruto brought his hand up to the back of his head in habit and scratched a few times. Kurenai smiled slightly at the gesture, and the cute expression on the boy's face when he was trying to think. Kurenai-sensei, you are a genjutsu specialist, right? Naruto finally questioned. Kurenai smiled proudly and nodded at the boy's question. It had been her dream to become Konoha's foremost genjutsu specialist. She had achieved her dream after many years of hard work, and she was extremely proud of her achievement. Can you teach me genjutsu? Naruto asked with an embarrassed grin on his face while scratching his head. Kurenai raised an eyebrow curiously to his request. Isn't your sensei supposed to teach you? Kakashi should be your sensei if I'm correct. Yeah, but Kakashi-sensei hasn't really been teaching us any jutsus. And all he's been teaching is teamwork and what to do in different situations. He spends more time teaching Sasuke anyways, Naruto argued. Kurenai frowned slightly. She had always known that Kakashi was lazy, but from the sound of it, he really hasn't been training his team as much as he should have been doing. And having once been an academy instructor, his laziness and favoritism grated on her nerves. Even now with her team, she taught each of her students equally despite being much closer to Hinata than Kiba or Shino. But while she had no problem specifically with teaching Naruto, as she had never thought of him as the Kyuubi, she didn't want to interfere with another Junin's team. You're better at genjutsu, right? So won't you be able to teach me genjutsu better than Kakashi-sensei? Naruto quipped, trying to convince the woman by complimenting her. Kurenai couldn't deny the truth in that statement. She was definitely more knowledgeable in genjutsu than the copy ninja. Still, she did not wish to interfere with Kakashi's team no matter how bad a teacher he may be. Still seeing the look of hesitation on her face, Naruto decided to use one of his more devastating jutsu in his arsenal. Its power is devastating to women, and on par if not exceeding the power of the infamous Waroke no Jutsu. Puppy Eyes no Jutsu. Please, and with that he activated the quivering lips of the technique. Kurenai stared at the boy with wide eyes and sweat dropped slightly. Though she had to suppress her female instinct and the urge to hug the boy who looked so incredibly cute. So cute. Well, it's not like teaching him genjutsu is that bad, right? Besides, it's true I could teach him genjutsu better than Kakashi. And none of my team shows any interest in learning genjutsu, she thought. Alright, she finally answered. The look of delight on Naruto's face and the sincere smile that formed on his face warmed her heart. Kurenai couldn't help but find his smile contagious and smiled in return. My team doesn't have training or missions on Thursdays and Saturdays after 4 p.m. We can train at Training Ground 8 at these times. Naruto quickly searched his memory and recalled that these times did not clash with his team schedule. So he nodded. Then, on impulse, he lifted her hand from her side and planted a soft kiss on the back of her hand. He gave the raven-haired woman another smile of gratitude and bid her farewell before walking away to his training. As he walked, he wondered what had compelled him to do what he just did. Why did I do that? I don't want her to take it the wrong way, he mused. Kurenai stood rooted to the spot she had been standing, blushing wildly. While she found it slightly embarrassing, it felt refreshing to be treated like a princess, rather than be looked at like an object. Ah, kawaii, what would everyone say if they knew you got so flustered by a 12-year-old? Her companion who had stood silently to the side throughout the entire exchange teased. Kurenai groaned. Enko. Thursday morning came around, and Team 7 as usual found themselves waiting for their teacher who was once again, late. Despite the annoyance that was Kakashi, Sakura found herself immensely curious to the reason for the excited and eager look on Naruto's face as the boy stared off into space while pacing back and forth impatiently along the bridge. Her eyes followed the boy as she tried to comprehend what made him so excited and impatient. The boy had become somewhat a mystery to her. With the changes he was going through, it was obvious to her that there was much more to Naruto than she had previously thought. And now that he no longer annoyed her, the more she spent with him, the more she realized that he had not been anywhere near as bad as she had previously made him out to be. She couldn't deny that Naruto was really a decent guy, now that he took things much more seriously. Not that she wanted him. To her, Sasuke was still better in every way. Meanwhile, Naruto continued his endless pacing as he waited for Kakashi to arrive. He was eager to get the missions done so he could train with Kurenai. He wasn't sure what made him feel so excited, all he knew was that he had never been so excited about genjutsu training before. Even his heart seemed to be beating faster, as if willing the time to go quicker along with his heartbeat. "What are you so happy about, Naruto?" Sakura asked, finally unable to hold her curiosity. "Nothing," Naruto chimed. Sakura narrowed her eyes slightly at him in suspicion, but did not press the issue. Feeling the girl's eyes still on him, Naruto turned to look at her and tilted his head slightly in question. "Yes." Sakura blushed slightly at the boy's stare, finding the way he tilted his head to be incredibly cute. And oddly enough to her, it had not been the first time she thought Naruto was cute. With the way he had been growing physically, she found him to be more and more attractive every day. The blue-eyed genin had grown much during the last 2 months. Naruto had always been the shortest in their team, shorter than her by an inch or so. But now, he was almost as tall as she was. His hair had also grown in length, as he had not bothered to cut it. Sakura honestly thought that it suited him better and even made him look more mature. While she would never admit that to anyone, she did think that Naruto had changed from looking like a goofy loudmouth idiot to a fairly handsome boy. If the way he had been growing in the last 2 months were any indication, she wouldn't be surprised if he had girls all over him in a few years. And that thought irritated her for some reason. Naruto raised an eyebrow at Sakura's reaction and scratched his head curiously. "There's that look again, but what does it mean? Come to think of it, she's not the only one that looks at me like that. I caught Ayame Onichan looking at me like that too. It's almost like how the fangirls look at Sasuke, nah." Naruto shook his head with some amusement. Sakura would never find him attractive, right? Especially since she made that quite clear. Not to mention cute girls like Ayame-chan. Naruto blinked. Cute? Since when did he start thinking of Ayame Onichan as cute? Not that it wasn't true. It was the opposite, in fact. Ayame was a very cute girl. Beautiful even, although not quite as stunning as Kurenai-sensei. The Junin just had that charm and aura of mystique that captivates people. Not to mention that perfect face that you couldn't help but admire like a work of art. And that flawless creamy white skin, exotic wine red eyes that he could lose himself staring into, and that pair of velvety red lips that made him just want to kiss. Gah! Naruto instantly found himself blushing a deep shade of red and banged his head against a wooden post on the bridge to get the perverted images out of his head. He leaned his forehead against the post, hiding his embarrassment. His teammates stared at him like he had just gone crazy, making him blush even more. "What?" He turned to his teammates, still slightly flushed. "Baka," Sasuke scoffed and looked away. Sakura gave him a curious look but eventually just shrugged and looked away. It was at this time that Kakashi arrived and distracted him from making more thoughts about the opposite. "Yo!" Kakashi greeted, holding up a hand. "Let's go get ourselves a mission." Kurenai leaned her back against a tree as she waited for Naruto to arrive. She shifted her body slightly as the bark of the tree dug into her back. She settled into a fairly comfortable position and let her mind wander. She contemplated to herself why she had agreed to teach the boy. Surely, it could not be because of that incredibly cute puppy-eyed look, no matter how adorable he looked at that moment. Perhaps it was because he reminded her of the Yondaime. Or perhaps she was simply curious about the Kyuubi container. She realized that she didn't really have an answer to the question. And she idly wondered what it would be like to teach Naruto. Although she had never personally taught the boy before, according to the rumor mill, he was a teacher's nightmare, what with his pranks and his terrible attitude towards his teachers. But then, he didn't seem as bad as those rumors said when he had approached her the other day. She really wasn't expecting the boy to have any talent in genjutsu considering his grades in the academy. After all, the barely graduated genin had been known as the dead last that had absolutely no talent in any of the ninja arts. Still, she fully expected him to at least put his best effort into the training to learn everything she would teach him. Kurenai shifted from her thoughts as she felt a presence enter the training grounds. "Hi Kurenai-sensei," Naruto called out in a friendly tone, blushing faintly as he recalled his thoughts earlier, in the morning. Kurenai just nodded at his greeting. "So what do you need help with?" Kurenai asked, calmly, getting straight to business. Naruto thought for a few seconds and scratched his head in an embarrassed manner. Everything really, but I definitely have to at least learn how to detect and dispel genjutsu. But I would like to learn some actual jutsu too. The red-eyed woman nodded. How about I teach you how to detect and dispel genjutsu, then let you practice by canceling some lower-level genjutsu that I'll cast on you. This way, you can get first-hand experience at dispelling and recognizing genjutsu. Naruto nodded enthusiastically and Kurenai smiled slightly at his enthusiasm. It was always nice to see a fellow ninja interested in her chosen art. The first step to detecting genjutsu is based on observation. Detecting genjutsu is the embodiment of the concept of looking underneath the underneath. It requires you to be able to notice anything out of the ordinary. Because of this, the higher level of detail in the genjutsu, the harder it is to detect. This is why normally people with higher intelligence have more aptitude in genjutsu. But if you have enough experience, you can compensate for a lack of natural talent. So before we do anything else, we'll work on your observation skills, Kurenai lectured. Naruto nodded for Kurenai to continue. I want you to observe and analyze what you can see about me. Tell me what you can observe of my personality and even fighting style and name my weaknesses and strengths. I'll do a short demonstration first so you'll know what to do. Hi. Your stance is solid even when you are standing around casually. So you are likely a taijutsu-oriented fighter and prefers straight-out combat. The way you constantly shift your weight between each leg tells me that you can react quickly to most situations. You might be concealing weapons underneath your sleeves. So avoid making contact with your arms unless with a weapon. But your coat is also quite loose and might be an advantage to grab onto it in a fight against you, Kurenai listed. Naruto simply stared at the red-eyed Junin in awe. He never imagined it was possible to know so much about a person's fighting style just from observing how a person looks and the way they stand. Now your turn. Naruto focused his eyes on the woman. He looked from her face down to her feet, then back up to her face again. You are a very beautiful woman, you could definitely use your looks to distract your enemies, Naruto spoke in an embarrassed tone. Kurenai waved her hand signaling for him to continue, while hiding a blush of her own. You probably prefer genjutsu and ninjutsu over taijutsu, since your body still has a very feminine shape and doesn't have large or very defined muscles. I think your taijutsu is also based on illusions. Most likely using your red sleeve to attract attention. Maybe even use the red color to disorient opponent by moving your arms really fast. And your clothes don't look like it'll give that much protection for combat. So you are likely to prefer stealth. I suppose your weakness is physical strength, so overpowering you in close combat is the best way to fight you. Kurenai was surprised. Considering how unobservant Naruto looked and seemed at times, his analysis of her abilities was quite accurate. Okay, Naruto. Your observations are pretty good. But you don't seem to be very confident with your observation skills. So I want you to practice this skill everywhere you go for the next few weeks and analyze in your mind everyone you meet during that time. Try to look for skills, strengths, weaknesses and threat level. And try to analyze not only people, but also your surroundings and how to take advantage of your surroundings for a fight. Hi, Naruto nodded in understanding. Now, we'll move on to actually detecting and dispelling genjutsu using your observation skills. Genjutsu can affect all of your 5 senses. Your touch, smell, hearing, sight, and even taste. Kurenai was surprised. Considering Naruto's reputation as a hopeless ninja, the boy had been doing surprisingly well. It took the boy many tries to finally learn how to perform the dispel technique properly. But once he had gotten it down, he had been able to dispel all but one genjutsu she cast on him. Kurenai had to admit that whoever said the boy had no talent couldn't be any further from the truth. Sure, there were those that learned at a faster rate than Naruto, but for the boy to become as proficient at recognizing and dispelling genjutsu as he was right now in only one day was an impressive feat. I'm surprised you did so well, Naruto-kun. I didn't expect you to be able to cancel the last one. Now, before we finish for the day, I'll show you a low-level genjutsu and let you practice it on your own. This is a jutsu called Magen, Narukumi no Jutsu. Kurenai performed the required seals and cast the jutsu at Naruto. Naruto felt a gust of wind blow against him, before a cluster of leaves carried by the wind was blown around him, slightly disorienting his vision. A moment later, Naruto found that the leaves to have disappeared. Naruto looked around the training grounds and saw the figure of Kurenai stumbling out from behind some trees. Numerous kunai and shuriken pierced her body. She reached out to him with agony showing on her face, before collapsing to the ground. Naruto knew it was merely the product of an illusion, but the imagery still brought shivers down his spine. He quickly brought his hand into a seal. Kai. The bleeding figure shimmered and faded away to reveal a perfectly fine Kurenai standing several feet away. Kurenai nodded in approval. Now pay attention, here are the hand signs for the jutsu. Kurenai formed the seals with her hands slowly in order for Naruto to follow. Naruto formed the same seals with his own hands several times, and when he finally got it down, he nodded to Kurenai. Kurenai looked up at the sky to see it almost dark. Okay Naruto-kun, that's it for today. It's getting dark and I still have to get home and find something to eat. Kurenai-sensei. Why don't you come to grab a bite to eat with me? Anywhere you like, my treat. Naruto asked. As thanks for training me. He added quickly. It was just an innocent expression of gratitude after all. He didn't want her to think he was trying to ask her out or anything. Although for some reason, he couldn't help but blush madly. Kurenai pondered it for a moment. She knew she would have ended up eating out anyways. She didn't feel up to cooking for the night, and getting a free meal sounded like a tempting offer. Not to mention that it didn't hurt to get to know her new student better. She was curious in the least. Everything she had heard about him from rumors had not been entirely accurate, if at all. Despite being dubbed talentless, he had learned to dispel genjutsu quickly. It was certainly a surprise, as she heard that he was supposedly hopeless in anything regarding genjutsu. And she was more than a little intrigued with his resemblance to the Yondaime. Certainly, the boy was like a mystery. A mystery that she would like to solve. Not to mention there was the added bonus that she could help Hinata win his heart if she knew the boy better. So, she nodded a yes. I've had a nice night. Thank you for having dinner with me, Kurenai-sensei. Naruto smiled softly at the red-eyed beauty. Kurenai smiled in response and agreed that she also had a great night. Naruto once again lifted her hand and gently placed a chaste kiss on her hand, then bid her farewell and left. Kurenai blushed faintly, half leaning against her opened apartment door. She watched him walk away, his cape billowing in the winds, making him seem almost regal. It seemed kind of strange, but the more she watched him, the more she saw the resemblance between Naruto and her former crush. Even the foxy grin the boy sported most of the time seemed to remind her of the Yondaime. She had immensely enjoyed the night. Even though neither of them had considered the night a date or anything even remotely related to a romantic sense, she couldn't help but wish that of the few dates she had ever been on, had been even half as nice as this night. She had never felt so relaxed with a person of the opposite, not with her peers, her students, not even with her friend Sarutobi Asuma, who she had considered to be the closest match to what she considered decent boyfriend material. Although she did hate his smoking. She supposed that Naruto's age and his lack of ulterior motives helped. Most men her age only wanted her for her body. It was the reason why she always turned down any men that approached her. Although it was a little strange that she felt more relaxed around Naruto than even with Kiba and Shino. But then, the boy's cheery and somewhat playful persona reminded her almost of her friend Anko. She supposed that familiarity relaxed her. Not to mention the boy was naturally easygoing and always informal, which helped lower her guard. Kurenai entered her apartment and gently shut the door behind her. She plopped herself onto her couch and thought back to earlier in the night. After they had left the training ground, they had chosen a modest restaurant that was inexpensive, yet served decent food. They had conversed while they waited for their meal, and their conversations continued through the night. She had half expected the blonde to brag about himself and even his dream to become Hokage. She had seen it before when she still worked at the academy. But it was not so, and she found their talk much more interesting and meaningful. It began with mostly insignificant chatter about themselves. But that quickly turned into an animated discussion about genjutsu. It was certainly a shock for her to find the boy as knowledgeable as he was in the theories of genjutsu. He had certainly done his reading. Although the boy did admit he could not apply the knowledge to practice. Still, the ideas and theories he had simply fascinated her. Increasing the strength and efficiency of genjutsu by using a higher concentration of spiritual energy while a possibility, was something she had never thought of. She was excited of the possibilities of this theory. And it reignited her passion for the art of genjutsu. It was then that she realized that she had not once been as excited by genjutsu since she had been acknowledged as the best genjutsu specialist in Konoha, as she was now. She decided then and there, that she would help Naruto learn genjutsu as best as she could. As thanks for renewing her interest in her art. She thought that perhaps they could even explore the possibilities of his theories together once he had reached a reasonable level in the art of genjutsu. Their discussion continued even long after they had finished eating, and when they finally decided to leave, they realized they had been talking for much longer than they had expected. Afterwards, Naruto paid the bill and walked her home like a perfect gentleman. Overall, it was a very enjoyable night. She could understand why Hinata liked the young man. He was definitely more than he seemed at first glance. He was an interesting person, and very good company. In fact, she felt rather jealous of Hinata. Even if her student had yet to win his heart, she had discovered this hidden gem where nobody even bothered to look and already had her heart set on winning his love. Kurenai had yet to even find someone that she would even consider dating. Hinata would be a very lucky girl if she could gain Naruto's love. The boy had even made her feel special and appreciated through the night without really even trying to. She couldn't really explain it. It was simple things he did that came together. The way he pulled her chair out for her, the way he paid rapt attention to her even when she talked about insignificant things, walking her home, and especially the way he looked at her in awe when they talked about genjutsu. It was just things that he did without any motives other than to be nice. Things he did sometimes without thinking. It was why she felt relaxed around him. Naruto was unlike most men that tried their hardest to impress her. She could feel that Naruto was simply being his natural friendly self. She had never before imagined that Naruto would be such nice company. She had to re-establish her opinions of the boy, considering he was different to what she thought she knew of him. He was unlike all the rumors that described him. She found herself enjoying the night so much that she could hardly wait for their next training session together. Kurenai sighed wistfully. If only he was her age. And he was quite cute too. 2 days later, Naruto entered training ground 8 once again. When he realized Kurenai was nowhere to be found, he paused his step in suspicion. He looked around, his brows creased in concentration. Then he relaxed and smiled. The blonde raised his hands in front of him and formed a seal with his hands. Kai. Clapping resounded from behind him and he whirled around to see Kurenai looking proudly at him. Good job. You have really improved your genjutsu detection skills even after just one training session. Naruto blushed slightly from the praise and scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. Feeling that he should show his new sensei his progress in the art of genjutsu, he cast the jutsu he had learned 2 days ago. In an instant, Kurenai realized that she was caught in the Narukumi no jutsu. The leaves that swirled around her were a dead giveaway. She quickly dispelled the jutsu before looking at Naruto surprised. It wasn't the fact that he was able to perform the jutsu that truly surprised her. But it was rather the fact that she did not notice the boy making any hand seals at all. He was either able to perform hand seals faster than she could see, or he was able to create the jutsu without hand seals. It was practically impossible for someone to create hand seals without her even noticing their arms move when she was looking right at them, especially for someone at Naruto's level. But while the second option was more likely, it should still have taken him weeks if not months of practice to achieve that level, even if the jutsu was merely AD rank. How did you get so good in such a short time? You would have only gotten a day's worth of practice at most. Kurenai inquired with surprise in her voice. Naruto smirked and responded with 2 words. Kage Bunshin. Kurenai was perplexed. How would Kage Bunshin help? The memories of a clone will be transferred to me when it dispels. If I train with a large amount of clones all working on a single jutsu, I gain all the experience when they dispel. I can cut down the time I needed to master a jutsu since I can create over 100 at a time. Kurenai nodded in understanding and was impressed. Not only did the boy have a chakra reserve large enough to make 100 solid clones, but he also had a good understanding of the capability of the Kage Bunshin no jutsu. Well, now that you are at a decent level in dispelling genjutsu and learned the Narukumi no jutsu, we'll move on to harder stuff. Kurenai snuck a short glance at the boy walking beside her. Her opinion of the boy was getting better and better, the more she got to know him. It was rare to find someone as hardworking as he was. Considering how intense she trained her own team, she could even argue that Naruto trained as hard, if not even more intense than her team. Although she could also argue that it was partially due to his massive chakra potential and exceptional stamina. The sheer amount of chakra he had used to practice repetitively, a genjutsu she had taught him would have worn her out after just half an hour at most. And the boy did it endlessly without even a single break for 3 hours straight. Even when he was starting to tire, he did not stop. She had even had at one point started to worry that the boy would collapse from chakra exhaustion. She had ended the session soon after that just to be safe. "Hey Kurenai, isn't he a little young for you?" a voice teased. Kurenai stopped walking abruptly and turned to the sound of the voice, to see her friend Enko looking amusedly at her. "We were just heading back from training, what are you doing here?" Kurenai explained. Enko raised her eyebrows. "I don't remember him being on your team." Enko then gave the genjutsu specialist a sly grin. "Are you two really training? Or were you two doing something else?" Kurenai blushed slightly at what the purple-haired woman was implying, but tried to brush off her teasing by changing the subject. "So what are you doing here, Enko?" the blush still adorning her face. Enko looked at the blushing Kurenai and then to the boy who was trying to hide his blush by looking away and making himself seem less noticeable. The Tokubetsu Junin smirked. "So easy to tease. Just came to see if you wanna go grab some dango," she answered. Enko looked back to Naruto who was now looking seemingly out of place, before Kurenai could reply. "So what's your name, kid?" "I'm Mitarashi Enko. My name's Uzumaki Naruto." "So, Kurenai-chan, how about some dango?" "What about you, kid? You wanna come too?" Naruto shrugged. "Sure, but I don't want to impose." "Don't worry, kid, I'm sure Kurenai won't mind." Enko turned to Kurenai and winked. "Right." Kurenai blush returned to her face once again. She didn't even know why she was blushing so much. Although she agreed that she didn't mind the young man's company. Not to mention she thought it would be amusing to see Enko and Naruto interact, seeing they are quite similar in personality. The three entered the dango shop and got seated on an unoccupied table. Enko was about to catch the attention of the waiter so they could order when a less than quiet sneer was aimed at them. "What a way to ruin the night. The damn snake bitch and the demon brat." Naruto, Kurenai and Enko frowned before looking in the direction of the voice. The voice belonged to an inebriated man who was glaring at them along with two other men that was given Enko and Naruto the same look. "Why couldn't they just die?" one of the other men murmured, to the agreement of his companions. Kurenai frowned and sent a glare with some killing intent at the men, shutting them up, before looking at Enko and Naruto worriedly. Enko seemed to have shrugged off the heated comment, and assumed a cheerful face. The purple-haired Tokubetsu Junin loudly called out an order of a massive batch of dango for the three of them, to the waiter. Enko hated this. She had never done anything to deserve the villagers' scorn. She had once been a respected kunoichi of the village, becoming hated and scorned, all because of one man. Orochimaru. Oh, how she loathed that name. Not only had he given her the cursed seal of heaven, then cast her away when he decided there was no more use for her. Merely having once been his apprentice continues to haunt her both through the curse seal and the contempt of the village passed on from teacher to apprentice. But there was nothing she could really do. And she really hated this helplessness. He was an S-ranked missing nin, and as much as she hated to say it, also her former sensei. He had taught her practically everything she knew. As much as she wanted revenge against him, she knew she was unlikely to ever get it. She could never be able to defeat the man with the very same techniques he taught her. All she could do was bear it all. But damned if she would let these bastards see how much it affects her. While Enko didn't seem to be affected by the men's insults, Naruto could easily see through her mask. He placed a hand on Enko's shoulder, catching the woman's attention. He looked into the woman's brown eyes and gave her a sad smile. For a brief moment, he let his own mask drop. The woman gasped softly, seeing his eyes full of pain and sadness. Eyes so similar to her own. In an instant, the sadness was gone, replaced by the same mask he always donned. Naruto flashed her a cheerful smile. He didn't know why those men hated her. But he could understand her pain. To be hated, to have their very existence scorned. He wanted her to know that he sympathized with her, let her know that he would be there for her. Having experienced sadness his entire life, he could not bear to see anyone else sad. Even if he had only known the woman for a few moments, she had been kind enough to invite him for dango and he wanted to show her kindness in return. To show her that she wasn't alone. Enko returned a smile of her own, letting the boy know that she was grateful and that she understood his pain just the same. They exchanged another smile. No words were said. They didn't need to. Even if they barely know each other, their pain connects them, almost like family. They each gave Kurenai a reassuring smile and the three settled into a comfortable silence as they waited for their order. Kurenai couldn't help but smile at her companions. She had seen the sadness on Naruto's face when he had dropped his mask. She couldn't help but admire his strength of will. To be hated and scorned by almost the entire village, yet he had overcome this hardship and remains innocent and pure of heart. He was so kind to Enko, even despite having only known her for less than an hour. She was honestly happy for the both of them. To finally find someone that could understand their pain. Even if she had been friends with Enko for a long time, she knew that there was a part of her behind the emotional wall Enko had built up that she would never be able to reach, having never experienced the same pain the purple-haired Junin had experienced. She hoped that Naruto could help Enko finally get on the road to healing. Not only for Enko, but for both of their sakes. For an entire month, Naruto would train with Kurenai in Genjutsu at least twice a week. They would always end up going to dinner together, as for some reason they could never be bothered to cook for themselves after their training sessions together. Even when not training, they could often be found together, mostly along with Enko. Enko had gotten somewhat fond of the blonde after that first night, and she liked to invite the boy when she and Kurenai went out for lunch, dinner or just to hang out. This night was no different. So where are we going to go eat tonight? Naruto asked his female companions. Dango. Enko cheered. Both Kurenai and Naruto groaned in complaint in unison. No way. We've had dango the last 3 times we went out for food. We should get some ramen, Naruto protested. Enko growled slightly. Who cares if we had it 3 times in a row? Ramen, dango is the way to go. What? Ramen is way better than dango. Naruto gave her an offended look. Enko stuck her face close to the boy and narrowed her eyes at the boy trying to intimidate him. No way is ramen better than dango. Unfortunately for her, Naruto would never back down when it came to ramen. Ramen is better. Dango. Ramen. Dango. Kurenai stared at the scene in amusement and couldn't help but let out a small laugh. It was funny sometimes seeing the two fighting like siblings. Hearing the laugh, the two stopped their argument and looked at Kurenai. Fine. We'll let Kurenai-chan decide what we'll have tonight, Enko suggested. Naruto nodded, and the two gave her an intense, expectant look. Kurenai couldn't help but sweat drop at the fierce competitiveness of the two when it came to their respective favorite food. I suppose we can go to that ramen place you like so much, Naruto. It's only fair since we've had dango for the last 3 times. Enko growled slightly at the triumphant grin on Naruto's face and the victory sign he flashed her, but settled on a pout for being denied her precious dango. She decided to get some payback and wipe that smirk off his face. Taking your little boyfriend's side now, are we, Kurenai-chan? Kurenai and Naruto instantly blushed beet red and the boy choked slightly on his breath. Enko returned the triumphant grin, smirking even wider seeing the glare Naruto sent her way. Kurenai meanwhile was trying to make herself seem as small as possible to hide her embarrassment. She had learned much about Naruto throughout the month. He was hardworking, kind and cares deeply for his friends. She even found him good-looking albeit a bit too young. It was no surprise that she had thought of Naruto in a romantic sense more than once, despite how unlikely it was. She couldn't really blame herself. After all, he had all the qualities she looked for in a potential boyfriend. Even that innocent, childlike playfulness he had did not deter that thought. Still, Kurenai felt a little guilty. She felt like she was betraying Hinata. Not only was she closer to Naruto than Hinata had ever been, and even if their relationship was strictly between friends, she couldn't help but wonder what it would be like if he was her age. She knew it was not going to happen considering how much younger than her he was, but it didn't make her feel less ashamed. Especially since helping Hinata win his heart was one of the reasons she wanted to get to know the young man better. And rather than making progress in that respect, here she was fantasizing about him being all grown up. When the three arrived at the Ichiraku ramen stand, they sat down with Kurenai and Anko on each side of Naruto. "Hi Asen, Ayame-chan." Naruto called to the father and daughter that worked at the stand. "Hi Naruto-kun," Ayame smiled sweetly at him. Unlike most other villagers, the ramen girl had always liked Naruto. To her, he was always a nice boy, determined and caring. She knew he would be great boyfriend or husband material when he matured. And she knew that he was starting to mature recently. Not to mention she was starting to find him very handsome with the way he was growing, especially now that he had abandoned his old jumpsuit. Meanwhile, Kurenai had caught the looks Ayame was giving Naruto. Kurenai frowned and found herself unconsciously clenching her hands into tight fists. Although unaware of what she was doing, the raven-haired beauty instinctively shifted in her seat so her body leaned towards Naruto, almost as if she was possessive of him. Ayame caught the gesture and frowned in response, before settling with a small glare at Kurenai. Tension began to rise. Naruto on the other hand remained oblivious to the exchange between Kurenai and Ayame. But their actions were not lost to Anko, who couldn't help but smirk at the fun she could have with teasing Kurenai later. "So, what would you and your friends like?" Tyuki asked his number one customer with a smile. "A miso ramen for me please." Naruto called cheerfully. "Can I have a seafood ramen please?" Kurenai answered in a polite tone to Tyuki, before sending a glare of her own at Ayame. "A pork ramen for me." Anko cheered, eager to get some food in her stomach, although nowhere near as enthusiastic as Naruto. For Naruto, the wait for ramen seemed to be excruciatingly long, but in reality it had only been a few minutes. After the food was served, they ate their food, while the three engaged in a light conversation. Kurenai had seemed to calm down after Ayame had returned to her work. "So Naruto, I didn't know you liked older women. I thought you liked Sakura." A voice from behind them teased. The three turned and found the copy nin Kakashi looking at them in amusement. Naruto blushed bright red and crossed his arms and looked at Kakashi indignantly. "I got over Sakura a while ago. And so what if I do like older women? You jealous or something?" Kurenai immediately blushed a deep red. He likes older women. Does it mean he might like me that way? If it was possible, her face turned even redder at that thought. But Kurenai stopped her immediate train of thought. She should not think about things like that. He was way too young for her, right? And Hinata likes him, right? But he liked older women. Kurenai quickly caught herself again and stopped those thoughts drifting back into her mind once again. She didn't even know why these thoughts keep making their way into her mind. Sure, Naruto was a very nice boy, but she was sure she didn't like him that way. Not to mention he was too young. Right. Plus, she was supposed to help Hinata win his heart. Ayame meanwhile, was inwardly cheering. "Yes, I thought he might not like me because I'm a few years older than him. I have a chance, all I have to do is lure him with ramen, there's no way he can resist." Ayame thought with a wicked grin. Anko blushed slightly, but otherwise just smirked. She snuck a glance at Kurenai who seemed to be in some kind of inner conflict, then to the girl from the ramen store, before looking at Naruto. Her smirk grew larger. "Oh yeah, so much teasing material. Oh, you really do like older women. I was just teasing. And what's this?" Kurenai and Anko. At the same time, Kakashi continued his teasing. Naruto's face turned bright red at his sensei's accusations and was about to reply. Anko stepped in and grabbed the Junin by the front of his shirt. "Are you implying something?" Anko gave the copy nin a sickly sweet smile that somehow couldn't even hide the dangerous undertone. Kakashi sweated slightly under the purple-haired Junin's stare. Nothing, Kakashi said quickly, waving his arms trying to placate the bloodthirsty kunoichi. Anko narrowed her eyes slightly at him, before finally releasing him. "Well then, have fun you three." The copy nin called out in a rush before leaving via Shunshin no Jutsu. Naruto groaned. "Oh man, I bet I'm gonna be on the end of his jokes for a long time." Sue. "How was your date last night Naruto?" Kakashi teased. Sakura and Sasuke looked at Naruto suddenly, stunned. Naruto had a date. Since when did he have a girlfriend? Sakura felt a small pang in her chest when she looked at the blonde. Naruto has a girlfriend now. Was that the reason he no longer paid her much attention like he used to? Was it because he found someone better than her? She realized now how much Naruto really affected her. She realized now that it was because of Naruto, not Sasuke, that she had gotten over her low self-confidence when she was younger. It was because of how determined he was in gaining her affection that let her know that at least someone found her beautiful, desirable even. But now that he no longer did that, she found herself without that reassurance. And she couldn't help but feel self-doubt slowly creeping back in her mind. Even lately, without that assurance, her efforts to woo Sasuke hadn't been as determined as it had used to be. She couldn't help but question her own self-worth. Was she not beautiful enough? Was it because of her large forehead? Did Naruto feel that she was no longer worthy of him now that he was actually good-looking? Did Naruto finally realize there were better and more beautiful girls than her? Was that why he abandoned her? Sakura clenched her fist tightly. She couldn't understand why Naruto having a girlfriend bothered her so much. So what if he found himself a girlfriend? As long as she got Sasuke, then it shouldn't matter to her, right? Right. But why did it hurt so bad? Why did she want Naruto's attention all to herself when she wanted Sasuke, not Naruto? It wasn't a date, damn it. Naruto growled. But how do you explain the blush on their faces? Kakashi continued in a teasing tone. There. As in more than one. Sakura felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. She hated that feeling. She had to resist the urge to punch something or someone. And in this case, that would be Naruto. Sasuke just stood there to the side looking at Kakashi and Naruto in amusement. It was obvious to him that Kakashi was just messing around with Naruto's head. Though he was curious as to whom Naruto had went out with that gave him that blush he sported now. What the hell are you talking about? Naruto growled out in annoyance. Oh, nothing, Kakashi said innocently. Grr, let's just go get our mission. This is Sasuke, arrived at point B, a voice sounded over the radio. This is Sakura, arrived at point C, Sakura's voice could be heard through the radio a second later. After a moment's silence, a third voice sounded over the radio. This is Naruto, arrived at point A. You're slow, Naruto, Kakashi reprimanded. Naruto grumbled slightly at being chastised. Damn, shouldn't have upped my weights so much in one go, Naruto thought, grimacing slightly, feeling the strain on his body. Okay, Team 7, EH. Kakashi paused, as he was about to give the command, surprised by sudden movement. The target has moved. After it, Kakashi ordered. A small dark blur could be seen moving from bush to bush, dashing madly to hide from the following ninjas. After the target, 3 figures could be seen ducking around their hiding spots behind trees to get a glimpse of their target, maintaining it in their sights. Okay, he's there, Naruto confirmed through the radio. They quickly moved from tree to tree, gaining ground on the target while keeping as silent as they could to hide their presence. Kakashi held his microphone and questioned his team, what's the distance to the target? 5 meters, I'm ready to go, Naruto responded. Sasuke, ready to go, Sasuke confirmed. Me too, Sakura replied. Okay, go, Kakashi ordered. Naruto took a quick dash towards the target and then dived, tackling the target into the ground before capturing it in a death grip. I got you, Naruto cheered. Does it have a ribbon on its right ear? Is out target Tora? Kakashi questioned. The target, revealing itself to be a cat, began to scratch the shit out of Naruto. Naruto lifted the cat out further away from himself to not get scratched but struggled to maintain grip on the cat. It's the target for sure, Sasuke confirmed. Okay, Operation Capture Tora the Lost Pet, complete, Kakashi concluded. Isn't there a more exciting mission we can work on? 2 massively loud voices could be heard from Kakashi's earphone, causing the Junin to fall on his. Oh, my cute Tora-chan, I was so worried about you. The Fire Lord's wife, Madame Shijimi Death, hugged the cat while rubbing her face against the poor cat. Tora's eyes bulged out of their sockets, struggling to breathe from the tightness of the hug. Tears could be seen leaking from the cat's eyes. Naruto smirked at the cat's discomfort. That cat's getting what he deserves. No wonder why he ran away. Sakura quipped. After the woman paid for the mission and left, the Hokage cleared his throat to get the team's attention. Now then, Kakashi's Unit 7's next mission is. The Hokage read from a piece of paper while smoking from his pipe. Babysitting Yoju-sama's boys, grocery shopping at the neighboring town, help dig up potatoes at. No, Naruto demanded. No thanks. I want more exciting missions. Choose something else. There's some truth to that, Sasuke thought, also wanting better missions to improve his skills. Sakura just rolled her eyes. Kakashi just sighed, having seen this coming for a long time. D-ranked missions are, after all, the bane of a ninja's career. Iruka slammed his hands onto the table. Idiot. You're still a rookie ninja. Everyone needs to start with easy missions to gain experience. But we've only been doing dumb missions lately, Naruto argued. Kakashi slammed a fist into the top of Naruto's head, knocking him to the ground. Naruto. It looks like I need to explain to you what missions are, the Hokage lectured. Listen, a lot of clients come to this village every day. They request things from babysitting to assassinations. These requests are separated into A, B, C or D rank according to difficulty. We hire officials, assign the missions to appropriate ranking ninja with appropriate abilities. You have all become genin recently, so D-ranked missions are the best for you. The Hokage unrolled the list of D-ranked missions before looking at Team 7. I had tonkatsu ramen yesterday, so I'm going to eat a miso ramen today, Naruto mumbled to himself, looking away from the Hokage, deliberately trying to piss the leader of the village off and doing a damn good job at it. Listen, the Hokage roared. I'm sorry, Kakashi sheepishly apologized as he had also tuned out the Hokage's boring lecture. Look Gigi. We've been doing D-ranked missions for a couple of months now. Our teamwork is high enough for a higher level mission. We're wasting out talents and effort doing these chores. Unlike Team 8 that specializes in stealth and reconnaissance, and Team 10 in infiltration and assassination. We, Team 7, are a combat specialist team. With Sakura providing long-range and genjutsu support while me and Sasuke engage close range with ninjutsu and taijutsu. We're never gonna get better if we don't get to at least fight some bandits, and definitely not by catching cats or buying groceries, Naruto argued. Everyone looked at Naruto in wonder. Since when did he get so mature? And when had he gotten so smart? And how did he know what the team specialized in? Sarutobi looked at Naruto proudly. He was happy to see him mature so much in the last few months since he had become genin. He was glad the boy's true talent were finally beginning to show through. The Hokage laughed lightly. C-ranked missions were generally fairly low risk anyways. It wouldn't hurt for them to gain some experience. Naruto had been right, a combat team cannot gain experience in their field without some experience in real combat. Alright, I will allow you a C-ranked mission. It's an escort mission, Sarutobi informed the team. Can you please come in now? The Hokage called out. Team 7 watched as the door slid open to reveal a bearded man holding a bottle of sake. What? They're all kids. The man cried out in disappointment. To the team's chagrin, the man brought his bottle of sake to his lips and began chugging down as much of the contents as he could in one gulp. And they watched dumbfounded as their client leaned drunkenly against the doorframe, struggling to stand. Hey, is that blonde one really a ninja? The man drunkenly said. Naruto just ignored him but was inwardly planning his revenge. He'll regret saying that after I show him why I'm the king of pranks. I am the bridge construction expert, Tazuna. I will have all of you protect my life with yours until I complete the bridge, the man declared. Naruto found the mission to be quite refreshing. He had never been out of Konoha his entire life, and he wondered what it was like outside of his village. The team traveled at a moderate pace along a dirt path towards the country of Wave. To Naruto's disappointment, nothing exciting had happened. It was not until the third day of travel when something happened. As they continued down the path, they walked past a puddle of water in the middle of the road. Kakashi took a brief look at it, but otherwise didn't seem to pay it much mind, and kept walking. Naruto gave the puddle a curious glance, but decided to follow Kakashi's example and pretended to ignore it. But inwardly, he was smirking. I trained with a genjutsu specialist. There's no way you can catch me with a dodgy genjutsu like that. Though he had to admit, Kurenai's training had improved his observation and detection skills drastically. If he hadn't had that training, he would have probably missed it entirely. As they passed the puddle, Kakashi began slowing down his walking pace so he could linger at the back of the group to protect Tazuna and his team. After they passed, two masked figures rose from the puddle before rushing at Kakashi, throwing their bladed chain around him. The chain wrapped around the Junin, making him unable to move. First one. A voice called out. The two masked figures yanked at the chain, the small blades on the chain digging into Kakashi's flesh, eventually tearing Kakashi apart. Sakura looked on in shock, while Sasuke looked on impassively, as if he didn't really care Kakashi had just died. It would not do for him to lose his cool now, in the time of battle. He would worry about Kakashi's death later. Naruto on the other hand smirked as he knew Kakashi had known there were enemy ninja and had easily escaped. Kawarimi, he thought in wonder. It truly was a simple, yet very effective technique. It was no wonder it was a basic requirement technique for all ninja. Sakura screamed in fear as blood and remains of Kakashi splattered all over the ground, kicking a cloud of dirt. Not giving the team to recover, the two figures rushed behind Naruto. Second one. They were almost sure it would be an easy kill. The boy was only a genin after all. Naruto stood there unmoving. To others, it would seem almost like he was frozen in fear. But if they could see his face, they would see the smirk he still sported. He was ready for this. The cloaked men launched their chain at Naruto. But before it even came close, Sasuke already moved and thrown a shuriken, catching the chain, embedding it into a tree on the side of the path. A kunai quickly found itself lodged into the tree through the hole of the shuriken, effectively holding the chain in place. The two assailants yanked harshly at the chain, but it refused to be dislodged from the tree. The kunai was simply embedded too deeply in the tree for them to remove it easily. In a flash, the Uchiha had jumped onto the two men's back, grabbing both by their heavy metal gauntlets in each hand, before kicking them in the face. Show off, Naruto almost rolled his eyes at his teammates' use of flashy moves. Personally, he would just pound their face in. Despite the blow to the face, the two men recovered quickly, immediately releasing the chain that held them to the tree from the metal contraption on their arms. The two men that had been once connected together by the chain now split apart, one rushing at Naruto once again, the other rushing directly at Tazuna. Naruto had been ready and quickly moved in front of Sakura and Tazuna, who were both still terrified after witnessing the demise of their Junin team leader. Though admirably, Sakura had still managed to draw a kunai from her holster in an attempt to protect their client. But the fear was evident. Her body was shivering uncontrollably in fight. And she was cringing back slightly. "Don't worry, Sakura," Naruto assured her with a soothing tone. Sakura relaxed her tense body slightly. The image of her dying a gruesome death like Kakashi had was temporarily replaced by a safe and warm feeling triggered by Naruto's assuring tone. But her fear rose once again as she watched the two men close in on them. Her body froze once again, too frightened to even think to dodge or block. A soft popping noise came from behind them, making Sakura and Tazuna almost die from heart attack. It had only been a clone Naruto created that made the noise when it suddenly popped into existence. But it had been so sudden it made both Sakura and Tazuna jump in fright. The clone got into a ready stance, forming a circle around Sakura and the client, along with the real Naruto and Sasuke, who had moved into formation, protecting Sakura and Tazuna from harm from all directions. Naruto and his clone stood impassively in a ready stance, waiting for the perfect moment to strike as the men closed in on them. Hidden beneath their sleeves, they had drawn a kunai in each hand. But before Naruto had a chance to react, Kakashi decided it was time to step in, lest his team be injured. In a blink of an eye, Kakashi had both assailants knocked out and captured in a headlock. Sakura's eyes widened in surprise. "Kakashi-sensei!" Sakura cried out in relief and shock at seeing the Junin alive. She looked to the spot where his supposed remains had been and found a log cut into pieces. Tazuna sighed in relief under his breath. "I'm saved." Kakashi gave his team a proud look. "Good work, team," he praised, although his gaze lingered a bit on Naruto. He reviewed his team's performance in that exchange. Sasuke did quite well as expected, and Sakura, while scared, did manage to place herself in front of the client. But Naruto had handled the situation surprisingly well. He had expected the boy to do quite poorly in his first life and death situation. He knew that the first combat experience for a ninja was always the most dangerous and has the highest chance for casualties. It was one of the reasons he had let his team handle the enemy ninja at first, so they would know what it was like in that kind of situation so they won't freeze up when he wasn't there to help. But Naruto did not seem surprised that he got away. Even Sasuke was a little surprised he lived even if he hid it well. And the blonde had remained calm enough to protect both Tazuna and Sakura. And even though the Kage Bunshin only required one hand seal, he had not seen Naruto form it. The boy had certainly come a long way since the team started. The Junin then turned to Tazuna. By the way, Tazuna-san. What is it? The man stuttered. Even though Kakashi had looked at him with his usual dispassionate and lazy expression, he could not deny that he was really intimidated. I need to talk to you. It only took Kakashi several moments to bind the two assailants to a tree with rope. He studied them for a few seconds before informing his team of his discoveries. The Demon Brothers. These guys are Chunin class ninja from Kurigakure. They are ninja known to keep fighting no matter the cost, Kakashi explained. How were you able to detect our action? One of the assailants demanded. It hasn't rained for the past few days, and it's sunny today, so a water puddle shouldn't exist, Kakashi said. Why did you let the kids fight when you knew that? Tazuna asked. If I was up to it, I could have killed these two in a blink of an eye. But I need to know who the target for these two was, Kakashi clarified, before leveling a dangerous glare at Tazuna. Tazuna gulped nervously, but pretended to be innocent. What do you mean? In other words, were you the one being targeted, or someone from our ninja group? We have not heard anything about you being targeted by ninja. Your request was to protect you from armed groups like gangs and robbers. If ninja were our enemy, this mission would have been an expensive B rank. It looks like you have your reasons, but it only makes it troublesome for us if you lie in your request details. This mission is out of our league. Let's just quit, Sakura finally said, sounding more than a little scared. No, Naruto stated firmly. We asked for AC ranked mission. We can't give up now. And I'd rather continue than go back to catching cats. Sasuke agreed, having no desire to return to D-ranked missions. Plus, he easily handled these so-called Chunin-level ninjas. Sure, the next time will likely be stronger ninja, but that's what he wanted. He wanted to test his strength against strong opponents so he would know how far he was from Itachi's level. Seeing both of her teammates refusing to back down, Sakura relented. She looked at her teammates in amazement. Both of them were so confident and strong. Sasuke was his usual cool self, but she had honestly thought Naruto would have panicked just as much as she had when they had watched Kakashi get killed. And she couldn't describe it. But she felt warm and safe when Naruto reassured her with his words. He was so calm and composed even in that situation. A thought crossed her mind. Was this really Naruto? The same boy that failed the Genin test 3 times. The mist is so thick, I can't see what's ahead, Sakura commented as she fidgeted slightly while sitting on the boat. The attack by the mist Chunin earlier made her nervous. We should be able to see the bridge soon. If we move along the side of the bridge, we'll be at the country of Wave, the person rowing the boat said in a hushed tone. When they got closer, they were finally able to see the bridge. The sight of the bridge made Naruto stare in awe. Having never been out of Konoha in his life, he had never seen a bridge anywhere near as big as this one. It's huge, he thought. Tazuna-san, before the boat gets to the pier, there's something I need to ask you, Kakashi began, deciding it was time to find out the secret Tazuna seemed to be hiding. I need to know the identity of the ones who are after you. And the reason they are after you. Or we can call the mission off when we get ashore. Tazuna stayed silent for a few moments before finally speaking, realizing that it was inevitable that he had to reveal the truth if he still wanted their protection. As you said, this mission is most likely out of your job description. There's an extremely terrible man after my life. An extremely terrible man? Kakashi asked in a curious tone. Yes, Tazuna confirmed. Who is it? Kakashi inquired calmly. You should have at least heard of the name of the marine transport billionaire, Gato, Tazuna revealed. Gato. The one from Gato Company. He's one of the richest men in this world, Kakashi said, a little surprised that such a man would be involved in this. Yes, he is the president of the marine transportation company on the outside, but underneath, he uses gangs and ninja to smuggle drugs and illegal goods. He also does nasty jobs like takeovers of other companies and countries. A year ago, he set his sights on the country of Wave. He entered this country using violence and wealth as his shield and quickly took over the island's sea traffic and transportation. On an island like the country of Wave, controlling the sea means ruling over the wealth, politics and the people. And the one thing that Gato is afraid of is the completion of the bridge that has been under construction for quite some time. I see, so you as the one building the bridge became an obstacle to him, Sakura summarized. Then those ninja were sent by Gato. Sasuke summed up. But I don't understand. He's a dangerous man that uses ninjas. Why did you hide that fact when you came to us? Kakashi inquired. Nami no Kuni is a really poor country. Even the daimyo don't have much money. We don't have the money to request for an expensive B-ranked mission or above. If you quit the mission after I land, I'll be killed for sure, Tazuna explained his situation. Deciding the only way to convince the ninja to help him was to guilt-trip them, Tazuna continued. But there's no need for you to blame yourselves. Only my cute 8-year-old grandson will cry and cry some more. And my daughter will just hold a grudge against Konoha ninja and live a lonely life, Tazuna exaggerated. But it's not your fault. Team 7 looked at each other slightly ashamed that they had considered abandoning the old man. Kakashi scratched his Hitai 8 with a finger in contemplation before deciding the team's course of action. I guess it can't be helped, we will continue escorting you. That's good to hear, Tazuna said with hope in his eyes. We're almost there, Tazuna, looks like we haven't been noticed yet. The rower said. Thanks, Tazuna replied gratefully and relieved there had not been any more incidents, yet. As they got off the boat, the feeling of danger increased. And the team became more nervous. The next time they attack, they will send Junin level ninja instead of Chunin level. Oh well, Kakashi contemplated while heightening his guard. He was annoyed at being given such a troublesome mission. As they walked, Naruto began to get the feeling they were being watched and tightened his guard. He extended his senses trying to find the one spying on them. There. In one motion, Naruto drew and then threw the kunai into a bush, at the presence he had sensed. His teammates and Tazuna jumped slightly, startled by his sudden action. Kakashi on the other hand had also noticed the presence. What are you doing, Naruto? Are you trying to scare us? Sakura screamed at him. Naruto ignored her complaints and slowly and cautiously approached the bush. Sakura felt a little disappointed that Naruto completely ignored her, not even sparing her a glance. Behind the bush revealed a white rabbit that was almost nailed to the tree behind the bush. Naruto, look what you've done. Sakura berated the blonde for almost killing such a cute little creature. Naruto ignored Sakura's berating and frowned looking at the rabbit. A rabbit shouldn't have triggered my senses. And at this range I shouldn't have missed hitting it with my kunai. That means it was likely used for Kawarimi. Whoever it is, they are no amateur, and they've come prepared. Kakashi was having similar thoughts. That was a snow rabbit. But they only have white fur during winter when the days are short. That means it was raised inside a place without sun specifically for the replacement technique. Kakashi snuck a glance at his team. Naruto seems to have it figured out. And Sasuke has caught on as well. Good. But Sakura doesn't seem to be ready for this. He focused his senses to search the area, while keeping up his lazy appearance making him seem like he was unaware. A faint presence prickled his senses. So one have come already. Up above the team in the trees, a figure watched. I see. Ninja at the level of the demon brothers can't handle this. That is Konoha's copy ninja. Sharingan no Kakashi. The small twitch in his facial muscles reveals that he was grinning, eager to fight the famed Konoha nin. His muscles tensed, then grasped the hilt of his sword over his right shoulder and moved to attack. Kakashi's danger signals suddenly went blaring. A whistle through the air lets him know a projectile weapon was thrown at them. And from the speed and sound, a very large weapon was heading their way. Everyone, duck! A massive Zanbeitu-type sword came flying at the group from the trees above. Kakashi acted quickly and tackled Tazuna to the floor, hoping his team would react in time to dodge. The members of Team 7 dove to the floor at Kakashi's instruction, narrowly being missed by the sword by mere centimeters. The sword flew past them and was embedded into a tree 20 feet behind them. By the time they recovered, a figure stood upon the handle of the Zanbeitu, looking down upon them from the elevate position of the sword. The man was shirtless and masked and wore a mist Hitai 8 on his head. Naruto stared warily at the man who now stared down upon them as if they were his prey. That look alone puts him on edge. He knew without a doubt that this man could take him apart with ease. And the sheer size of that massive slab of steel that was a sword, the man now stood on, intimidated him all the more. A man that could not only lift the Zanbeitu, but also use it effectively must be insanely strong. Kakashi frowned as he studied the man. This man, if he guessed right about his identity, then he was in the fight of his life. He swore to himself. His team was not ready for a confrontation with this kind of opponent. The gray-haired man tensed his body, preparing for battle. If he were by himself, then it wouldn't be a problem. But with his team. "You are Momochi Zabuza, the new Kenin from the hidden village of the mist." Kakashi spoke to the new Kenin in a carefree and unworried tone, unwilling to show any weakness to the enemy. Inwardly, Kakashi constantly evaluated the skill of the man. If he's our enemy, then I can't win like this, he thought. His hand reached up to his Hitai-8 as if preparing to pull it upwards. "I'm guessing you are Kakashi the Sharingan user," the former Kiri-nin spoke. Sasuke narrowed his eyes at Kakashi. "Sharingan. How did Kakashi-sensei get the Sharingan? It's an Uchiha bloodline trait." "Sorry, but you'll need to hand over the geezer," Zabuza said in a gruff voice. Kakashi frowned at this. If Zabuza's mission were to kill Tazuna, then this fight would be unavoidable. The gray-haired man tensed once again, knowing that his team's survival now rested on his shoulders. "Everyone, form the swastika formation, protect Tazuna-san. Don't join the battle," Kakashi ordered in an uncharacteristically grave tone. "What?" Sakura asked, taken aback. Naruto frowned at Kakashi's orders. Their team leader had always demanded proper teamwork from them. Now he wants them to not help at all. Not interfering with this battle is teamwork, Kakashi reassured them, as if he could read his thoughts. Naruto decided to obey Kakashi's orders, knowing that they would likely just get in the way if they got involved. Kakashi lifted his Hitai-8 up from his covered eye, revealing a red implanted Sharingan eye. Naruto widened slightly, seeing the scar in the eye. He briefly compared the red eye of the Sharingan to the eyes of his Genjutsu sensei. Unlike Kurenai's eyes, the Sharingan looked almost demonic. "Oh, I'm honored to see the Sharingan that I've heard so much about," Zabuza said to Kakashi in a mocking tone. "Sharingan, what does it do?" Naruto muttered under his breath. Even though he had read somewhere that the Sharingan was one of Konoha's premier bloodlines, he had no idea what it does. Squeezing the chance to boast the power of the Uchiha bloodline, Sasuke explained. Sharingan is said to have powers that can see through all genjutsu, taijutsu and ninjutsu and cancel their effects. But that's not the only ability the Sharingan possesses. Naruto raises an eyebrow at Sasuke's explanation. He thought these abilities alone were more than enough. And there was more. Correct. That isn't it. The scary part is that Sharingan can understand how an opponent's technique works and copy it, Zabuza explained. Zabuza looked to Kakashi. "When I was in the Kiri's Anbu, your information was listed in the bingo book, having a bounty on your capture. It noted that you copied more than 1,000 techniques. The man known as Kakashi the Copy Ninja." The genin stared at Kakashi with newfound respect. Sakura found herself staring at Kakashi in awe and jaws dropped. She didn't expect that the laid-back and lazy bum of a Junin to have that great of a reputation. What? Kakashi-sensei was that great of a ninja. But Sasuke gave their sensei a look of suspicion. He knew that the Sharingan was a special trait that appears only in limited people within the Uchiha clan. But aside from Itachi, he was the only other Uchiha left. Could he be? He wondered. "Let's cut the chit-chat. I have to kill the geezer now," Zabuza said, eager for a fight with the famed Kakashi. He bent down slightly into a crouching position atop his perch on his sword hilt. Quickly, the genins of Team 7 moved into the swastika formation around Tazuna, each standing on one side of Tazuna with a kunai drawn, in a ready stance and preparing to protect the old man with their life. "It seems I have to defeat you first," Zabuza addressed to Kakashi. Pushing off the tree with his feet for leverage, Zabuza yanked his sword free from the tree and jumped atop the lake ahead of the Konoha ninja group. With the sword once more strapped to his back, Zabuza molded chakra to stand on the surface of the water. Forming a seal, they began channeling large amounts of chakra into the water underneath him. "Over there," Naruto warned his teammates. "He's on top of the water," Sakura uttered, stunned at this feat. Having no idea of the water walking technique, she had no idea it could be done. Naruto and Sasuke, however, stayed impassive. Even though Sasuke was inwardly impressed. Kakashi spread his legs to shoulder width apart, bending his knees slightly. He tensed his calf muscles slightly, preparing to move quickly to counter Zabuza's initiative. He's embedding a lot of chakra into the water, Kakashi thought. He wondered what the Kiri Nin was going to do. Ninpo, Kurigakure no Jutsu. Zabuza muttered underneath his breath. Instantly, a thick mist formed around the man. In seconds, he was entirely shrouded from view. The mist expanded slowly, the Konoha ninjas and Tazuna becoming more and more nervous as their vision steadily decreased. He disappeared, Naruto thought to himself. The blonde knew that without his vision, it would be hard to fight a man that was obviously accustomed to fighting in these conditions. Otherwise, Zabuza wouldn't have used this jutsu. Kakashi moved forward several steps from the team towards where Zabuza had been standing. Sensei. Sakura called to Kakashi in concern, not only for Kakashi being too far for them to help, but also because they could no longer rely on Kakashi to protect them. He'll try to eliminate me first, Kakashi reassured her, but... What is he? Sakura whispered, terrified at having to face someone like Zabuza. Momochi Zabuza, he was in Kurigakure's Anbu and was known for his silent killing techniques. Kakashi explained. Silent. All of Team 7 thought in unison. Just as the name implies, it's a killing technique that's executed quickly and in complete silence. It's possible that you'll be dead before you realize it. And I can't use my Sharingan to its full potential in this mist. So don't let your guard down. Team 7 tensed even further, knowing that in the fog, if Kakashi couldn't fight to his full potential, then they stood no chance. But if you fail, you're only going to die, Kakashi tried to reassure them, but he ended up failing miserably at it. Sakura gulped in fear. Naruto frowned as he realized that the mist had gotten even thicker. He set himself deeper into his stance, his entire body on edge. Naruto frowned even more as the mist had gotten to the point where they could no longer even see Kakashi, who supposedly only stood less than 10 feet ahead of them. The blonde genin realized that they had to stay sharp if they were to survive this. If he could not see, then he'd have to use his other senses. He had improved his other senses in his training to fight against genjutsu. He extended his senses outwards, trying to detect Zabuza by smell, sound and chakra. Sensei. Sakura called under her breath worriedly as she could no longer see Kakashi. 8 points, a voice reverberated around them. The genins tensed from the malice in the voice. What is this? Sakura asked herself. Naruto frowned slightly. He could not determine the direction the voice came from. He knew what it was. Chakra-enhanced speech. It was originally a technique that could carry sound wave through large distances. But in this case, the voice seemed to come from all directions at once. Even if his hearing had improved, it simply wasn't good enough. The larynx, spine, lungs, liver, jugular vein, collarbone, kidney and heart, now where do you want to get struck at? The voice continued. Team 7 and Tazuna felt a shiver down their spines and sweated nervously. Naruto gritted his teeth, finding himself heavily intimidated. He took a look at Sasuke, who stood in formation beside him, equally unnerved. Naruto took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. His fear was distracting him from using his other senses. He could not afford that in this situation. He forcibly suppressed his fear and his hand tightened its grip on his kunai to stop his shaking. Several feet away from them, Kakashi formed a seal and released large amounts of chakra from his body. The chakras swirled around him, flickering and swaying like a flame. The chakra suddenly increased in intensity, and then swirling violently around the man, creating a gust of wind that completely blew away the surrounding mist. Eventually, the intense glow of his chakra settled into a faint blue hue that surrounded the Junin's silhouette. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief now that he could see again. But the killing intent in the atmosphere kept him on edge. But Sasuke began sweating heavily, eyes widening in terror at Kakashi's display of power. What an intense thirst for blood, this atmosphere. I feel like if I make one movement, I'll be detected and it'll get me killed. If I stay here for an hour, I'll lose my mind. Sasuke tried desperately to suppress his fear, but to no avail. His body disobeyed his commands and began shaking uncontrollably. Naruto frowned, seeing Sasuke freaking out in the corner of his eye. He gritted his teeth slightly as he noted that Sakura was also in the same condition. He knew this was simply Zabuza's intimidation tactics to make them lose the will to fight. The killing intent was strong, but he managed to suppress it as best as he could with pure determination. But he was distressed to see it working on his teammates. With them in this state, they would be of no help to him or Kakashi. Naruto looked concernedly at Sasuke. If in the chance that Kakashi could not defeat Zabuza, he would need Sasuke's help. He hoped fervently that Kakashi would be able to handle Zabuza. He knew that despite his lazy and laid-back attitude, the man was probably one of Konoha's best ninja. But if his instincts weren't failing him, then Zabuza was at Kakashi's level. The battle could easily go either way. But Sasuke seemed to get worse by the second. His shivering was getting stronger. The murderous intent of two Junins clashing, the feeling that my life is in someone's hand, no. I would rather kill myself to escape this feeling. The raven-haired boy's hands trembled heavily, as he slowly brought the bladed end of the kunai he held, towards himself. Sasuke. Kakashi's calm voice startled the boy, though calming him down slightly. Don't worry, I'll protect the three of you with my life. I won't let anyone on my team die. The resolve in his tone of voice calmed the genins down a bit more. I don't know about that. Zabuza disagreed with Kakashi's proclamation. In an instant, Zabuza had moved. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he realized Zabuza was trying to get behind them, between them and Tazuna. Naruto squeezed the handle of his kunai and swung his weapon behind him at Zabuza. With a loud clang, Naruto's kunai was blocked by Zabuza with his zanbeitu drawn. The blonde gritted his teeth and pushed against the sword, but struggling to push the pressure back. Sasuke and Sakura's eyes widened to find Zabuza behind them without them even realizing it before it was too late. And their eyes widened even more as Naruto was doing his best to hold back Zabuza. Naruto gritted his teeth even more, as the pressure from Zabuza's blade was slowly forcing him to his knees. But suddenly, Naruto found the pressure gone. He backed away a bit from Zabuza and blinked at the sight of Kakashi half-crouched beside with his kunai embedded into Zabuza's stomach. But rather than blood, water leaked from the wound falling onto the ground. Before either Naruto or Kakashi could react to the fact that it had been a clone, the real Zabuza had moved behind Kakashi, while the fake exploded into a mass of water. With a swipe with his zanbeitu, Kakashi was cut cleanly in half. To everybody's shock, Kakashi's body exploded into water. Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu. Zabuza's eyes widened. Did he copy it, in this mist? Before Zabuza could even blink, a kunai was held to his throat by Kakashi from behind. Don't move, the Konoha Junin commanded. This is the end. The genins having backed away from the two clashing ninjas stared in awe of their sensei. They smiled slightly at seeing Kakashi coming out on top. But their smile faded when Zabuza began laughing in a low dark tone. Kakashi's eyes widened in surprise that even being captured that Zabuza could laugh. This is the end. You don't understand. You can't defeat me with just your indiscriminate imitations, I can assure you that. Zabuza mocked, completely ignoring the fact that a kunai was being held to his neck. Kakashi frowned in worry at the confidence in Zabuza's tone. Did the man still have another trick up his sleeve? He tensed his arm slightly, securing his grip on his kunai and ready to slit Zabuza's throat if he made any sudden movements. But you're pretty good. I see that you had copied my water clone technique when you told your team you wouldn't let them die. By making your clone speak, you diverted my attention to the clone, while the real one used the Kurigakure no Jutsu I cast to hide and observe my movements. Zabuza smirked. However, I'm not that easy to defeat. Kakashi's eyes widened in shock as another Zabuza appeared right behind him, while the one Kakashi captured exploded into water. The three genins' eyes widened in shock and thought in unison, that one's a fake too. Kakashi turned around just in time to duck under Zabuza's sword. Zabuza, having been prepared and had expected Kakashi to be able to dodge it, swung his sword embedding it into the ground. Pushing off the hilt for leverage to increase reaction time, Zabuza turned and kicked Kakashi in the gut, sending the Konoha nin into the air in the direction of the lake. Grabbing the hilt of his sword, Zabuza pulled it out of the ground and rushed after Kakashi. Zabuza suddenly stopped his rush as he noticed that even having been struck, Kakashi had managed to litter the ground with caltrops, hoping to injure his feet when he gave chase. How idiotic, Zabuza snorted at the foolish move as Kakashi had obviously used the trap to cover him diving into the lake to regroup and regain his bearings and tactical advantage. Zabuza merely jumped over the caltrops and dived into the lake after Kakashi. His taijutsu skill is superb too, Sasuke muttered under his breath as he watched Kakashi being kicked away. It made him nervous that Kakashi was losing the fight. The idea of having to face someone like this did not sound good. A moment later, Kakashi surfaced from underwater with half his body still submerged. The Junin frowned as he felt the water to be unusually heavy. "What's with this water? It's heavy for some reason." "Idiot," Zabuza ridiculed as he appeared above Kakashi. His massive sword was once again strapped to his back, and he was already forming a chain of seals with his hands. Suoro no Jutsu. Kakashi looked behind him and swore. Shit. There was no way he could react fast enough to get out of this. Instantly, a sphere of water surrounded Kakashi, effectively capturing him within the shell of water. The copy nin let out a defeated sigh, knowing he had made a tactical mistake. "I thought I could use the water as cover, but it turned out to be a mistake on my part." He looked up at Zabuza, who had his arm connected to the water prison holding the jutsu. Zabuza laughed at the Junin's mistake. "You fell for it. This is a special prison that you can't escape from. Now then, Kakashi, I'm going to finish you off later." The former mist nin turned to look at the rest of Team 7. "First, I'm going to get rid of them." Team 7 flinched as they realized that they were next to fight. With Kakashi captured, they didn't stand chance at winning against Zabuza. Zabuza formed a seal with one hand, Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu. Kakashi gasped at Zabuza's plan to dispose of his team. By using water clones to fight his team, there was nothing he could do for his team. "I didn't think he was this strong." Water slowly rose from the lake the two Junin stood upon, slowly forming the shape of a man. It slowly solidified and took the form of Zabuza. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the clone, preparing himself to fight. He looked to his teammates, finding that neither had completely regained their resolve to fight, still too scared. He cursed. This was a time he really needed their help. "The three of you wear you forehead protectors thinking yourself as ninja. But ninja are people that have gone through many life and death situations," Zabuza spoke in an amused tone. "In other words, you can only call yourself a ninja when you appear in my bingo book. You three aren't ninja." Zabuza formed a half seal with a hand, and the genin found themselves surrounded by mist once again. He disappeared again. Naruto frowned, as he could no longer see Zabuza. The sound of movement alerted Naruto to an incoming attack. He barely dodged it by back-flipping several times over the kick Zabuza sent his way before setting himself into a low stance beside his teammates. Zabuza's clone raised his eyebrows slightly. "Oh. You have some skill to dodge that. But you're all still just kids," scoffing in disgust. "Everyone, get to Zuna-san and run. You can't win against him. He can't move as long as he has me trapped in this water prison. He won't be able to use his water clone once you get away from him. Run for now." Kakashi frantically commanded his team, seeing Zabuza finally on the attack. Sasuke gritted his teeth in frustration. "Run, you must be kidding. When you got caught, that was no longer an option. Even if we run, he'll just finish you off and he'll get to us sooner or later. Without you, we'll be annihilated. For us to survive, we have to save you." Sasuke took a look at Naruto, who looked back at him. They nodded at each other, understanding passed through them without the need for words. They had the same thing in mind. They have to fight, or they would die anyways. The only way to survive this was to free Kakashi. No longer having any other options, Sasuke strengthened his resolve to fight. He rushed at Zabuza's clone, in the process, launching a barrage of shuriken at Zabuza as he ran and never pausing in his steps. Seeing 5 shuriken heading his way, he used the flat part of his massive blade to swat the shuriken away. Sasuke took advantage of Zabuza's momentary loss of vision due to the massive sword blocking his view, jumped into the air and cocking both fists back above his head for an overhead hammer strike. Zabuza, although did not see him jump, quickly realized he was in the air. The former Kiri nin easily grabbed him out of the air by the neck, choking him, before tossing him back like 20 feet like a rag doll. Sasuke slid along the ground, kicking up a cloud of dirt. He breathed heavily and rubbed his throat, trying to ease the pain from being choked. He climbed to his feet slowly before deciding that they needed a plan to free Kakashi. Sasuke-kun, Sakura cried out frantically, seeing Sasuke so easily defeated. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he watched Sasuke being toyed with. That man was strong and fast. But, from what he had observed, even though Zabuza's clone had barely moved when Sasuke attacked, he seemed to react to Sasuke's attack much slower than he had expected. That probably meant the water clone was unlike his shadow clone, being weaker than the original in all aspects. If that were the case, then they would be able to defeat the clone if they worked together. Once they defeated the clone, they have one attempt to release Kakashi. If they failed, Zabuza will make a lot more clones in one go the next time. They needed a plan. After a moment, Naruto smirked. Hey, no brows. Put this into your bingo book. The man who will become the Hokage one day. The Konoha ninja. Uzumaki Naruto. He stated confidently. Sakura. Protect Tazuna-san. Sasuke, I have a plan. Naruto took command, speaking without turning to look at his teammates, keeping his eyes on Zabuza's clone at all times. He pulled out a Fuma shuriken from his backpack before dropping the pack to the ground. The pack will only get in the way in the fight. He slowly unfolded the Fuma shuriken and prepared to fight. He came up with a plan in this situation. Sasuke's eyes widened slightly. I can't believe you want to work as a team, Sasuke said in disbelief. Sakura stared wide-eyed, mouth gaping in awe. What is this feeling? Is this really Naruto? He didn't seem even a bit scared. And he looked so confident. Had he always been this strong? Did she underestimate him that much? And that smirk, when did he get? Well then, let's go wild. Naruto roared. Zabuza chuckled slightly. You seem to be confident, but do you even have a chance for victory? Kakashi was worried as his team was planning to try to rescue him. This isn't good. What are you all doing? I told you to run. The outcome of this battle was decided the moment I was captured. Run. Our mission is to protect Tazuna-san. Did you forget that? Kakashi cried out to the team, desperately trying to get them not to risk their lives. He didn't want them to die. It was technically sound advice in this situation. But the team were reluctant to leave Kakashi to his death. Naruto had taken their sensei's words to heart. Those who abandoned friends and comrades are worse than trash. Oh-san, Naruto spoke questioningly to Tazuna, who now looked down at the ground in shame for causing their predicament. Don't worry, I caused all of this in the first place. Sorry everyone. Fight as much as you want, he declared. Sasuke smirked. If that's how it's going to be. Are you ready? Naruto grinned at Sasuke, his blood boiling at the thought of a real battle. He got a small grin in return. Zabuza's clone laughed. You sure don't learn, do you? Still pretending to be ninja. When I was your age, my hands were already soaked in blood. Team 7 gasped, backing up slightly in shock. Kakashi gasped, the demon Zabuza. Oh, it looks like you've heard of me. Zabuza said arrogantly. A long time ago, the village of the mist was known as the village of the bloody mist. In that village, there was an obstacle that existed to become a ninja, Kakashi narrated. So you also know about the final test there. Final test. What is it? Naruto asked, trying to remain impassive. Zabuza chuckled. Students have to kill each other. Students were separated into groups of 2. Friends that have helped each other, shared their dreams and competed together. And forced to fight, to the death. Sakura held a hand to her mouth in shock and disgust. That's awful. 10 years ago, the hidden village of the mist had to go through a reformation because in the previous year, a small boy who had not even gained the right to become a ninja killed more than 100 of candidates that year without hesitation, Kakashi told them. The real Zabuza looked up slightly as if reminiscing those days. That was fun. Team 7 found their bodies tensing in nervousness at how bloodthirsty he seemed. In the blink of an eye, the Zabuza clone closed in on Sasuke. Sasuke's eyes widened, knowing that he wouldn't be able to react to his attack. But before the hit landed, Naruto had placed himself between Zabuza and Sasuke. Holding the Fuma shuriken in his left hand, and a kunai in his right, he swung the kunai at Zabuza's midsection. Zabuza dodged the swipe of the kunai by jumping backwards. But a rush of pain let the clone know that he had been stabbed from behind. Naruto smirked slightly. He had formed a clone in perfect timing to strike from behind at the same time he swiped with his kunai. Naruto knew that it only worked because Zabuza underestimated his speed, thinking that he wouldn't be able to intercept his attack on Sasuke. And neither did Zabuza expect him to be capable of making a clone, let alone making one unnoticed. He thanked the gods that he had gotten the idea to leave his training weights at home for this mission. There wouldn't have been any chance for him to take them off in this situation if he had worn them. He wouldn't have done so well against Zabuza with the weights on. With the water clone destroyed, the real Naruto dropped his kunai, then jumped into the air, throwing the Fuma Shuriken at the real Zabuza who was still holding onto the water prison. Zabuza just smirked. A shuriken won't work. This is too easy for me. Zabuza leaned slightly to one side, letting the Fuma Shuriken fly past by him before catching it by the hole in the center with his free arm. A sudden whistle of something traveling through the air broke him from his bragging, as he found another Fuma Shuriken heading for him. Another shuriken was in the shadow of the first shuriken. That's the Cage Shuriken no Jutsu. Zabuza thought. Sakura and Sasuke watched in awe as Naruto decimated the water clone, before using the Cage Shuriken no Jutsu to attack Zabuza. A second shuriken was in his blind spot. Sakura thought in surprise, not knowing her teammates' plan. But Sasuke frowned knowing that such a low-level trick won't be able to defeat Zabuza. Zabuza simply jumped over the shuriken while keeping his arm in the water prison, never breaking contact with it with his right arm. Still too easy, Zabuza thought smugly. Sakura stared on in shock as it completely missed Zabuza. He dodged it. A small smirk found itself forming on Naruto's face. Suddenly, the Fuma Shuriken that flew past Zabuza turned into Naruto, in a cloud of smoke. Everyone's eyes widened, but none more so than Zabuza. The transformed Naruto roared, "Now!" and threw a kunai at Zabuza from behind. Zabuza, knowing that he had underestimated these genin, knew he had to release the prison. But the real Naruto, taking advantage of a distracted Zabuza, used the Shunshin no Jutsu to get in close, disappearing and reappearing right in front of the man. Naruto gave the silent a hard punch to the chest, launching him backwards, breaking the prison in the process and directly into the path of the kunai. Zabuza's eyes widened even further as he realized that he couldn't dodge the kunai and was too disoriented from the punch to catch it. All he could do was raise his arm to shield himself. Zabuza roared in pain as the blade pierced and embedding it into his arm. But before he had time to recover, a voice shocked the hell out of him. "Kaden, Gukaku no Jutsu." Zabuza watched as the Naruto clone that had been disguised as a shuriken, and then thrown the kunai, was now standing atop the lake. Catching the Naruto clone making the last of the set of seals, and then a fireball heading his way, Zabuza quickly dropped the Fuma Shuriken he still held in his left hand and dived frantically out of the way. Zabuza breathed heavily, barely escaping from the Kaden Jutsu. Seeing as Naruto didn't press the attack, he took the time to pull the kunai out of his arm. He winced slightly from the pain and ignored the blood that was now flowing from the wound. He had gotten careless and had seriously underestimated these kids. He couldn't believe a genin had wounded him. That really pissed him off. His wound wasn't lethal, but it sure hurt like a bitch. But then, his pride hurt much more than the wound ever would. Still, he knew that with Kakashi now released, the blonde brat was the least of his concerns. Kakashi-sensei. Sakura cheered, seeing their Junin-sensei released from his prison. Sakura was stunned at what Naruto had done. He managed to release Kakashi and had also wounded Zabuza all by himself. Even Sasuke was shocked and more than a little jealous. The person he had always thought to be an idiot and a weakling had saved him from being hit, then released Kakashi alone and wounded the same man that made him almost commit suicide just because of some killing intent. He resolved to train harder to catch up. There was no way he was going to let the Dobi show him up again. Having had time to recover, Kakashi moved to engage Zabuza. He looked up into Zabuza's eyes with a dangerous glare, still a little angry at being captured. "Naruto, your plan was impressive. You have really improved," Kakashi praised, still somewhat stunned by the boy's performance. Naruto smirked. "He underestimated me." Sasuke had the urge to scoff at him and state that it was only luck. But he knew that it wasn't true. So he stayed silent. Kakashi took a few deep breaths to calm himself. Having now calmed himself down from his anger at being captured and shocked by Naruto, he gave Zabuza an impassive look. "Let me tell you, that technique won't work against me twice. What will you do now?" Zabuza did not answer, and a silent pause passed between the two. Naruto returned to where the rest of his team was standing, content to let Kakashi handle Zabuza now that he was free. The blonde boy nodded his head at Tazuna, telling his teammates to stay on guard. They both nodded and the three reformed the swastika formation around Tazuna, creating a barrier between Tazuna and Zabuza. Without warning, Zabuza drew his sword, and Kakashi likewise drew a kunai from his pouch. The two rushed at each other and clashed their weapons. The two find themselves locked in a battle of power, trying to overpower the other. After almost half a minute of struggling, the two found themselves to be equal and at the same time, both jumped back, putting some distance away from one another. Holstering his sword, Zabuza instantly began forming a chain of seals. Kakashi's Sharingan eye widened slightly and the copy ninja began to form his own set of hand seals. Both Junins became completely synchronized with their seal making. And at the same time, both Junins formed the bird seal, signifying the last of the chain of seals. Suiten, Suiryuden no Jutsu. Both Junins cried out at the same time. Two dragons made from water rose out from the lake they were standing on and circled each other in the air, fighting for dominance. As the two water dragons were clashing, the power from the jutsu created waves in the lake, which rushed towards the Genins and Tazuna. The group struggled a bit to maintain their balance as they tried to not to be pushed away by the waves or being pulled back into the lake. He formed that many seals in just a few seconds, and copied them perfectly. Sasuke watched Kakashi in awe of the power of the Sharingan. The two dragons eventually cancelled each other out, causing them both to explode into a mass of water directly over Zabuza and Kakashi. When the falling water no longer impeded their vision, Team 7 found Kakashi and Zabuza once again locked in a struggle of power, both with their weapons drawn and clashing. Zabuza placed one hand to the back of his sword, trying to add more power in his push. But Kakashi did not even budge. Something's weird, what's going on? The Sharingan is supposed to allow the user to memorize and copy an opponent's technique. But how can he execute the jutsu at the same time, Zabuza thought. While the two Junins continued to fight, a figure stood unnoticed in a nearby tree watching the battle from above. As if planned, both Kakashi and Zabuza once again put some distance between each other. Zabuza placed his sword on his back and the two Junins circled each other warily, trying to find a weakness in the other. When Zabuza formed a seal preparing to cast on jutsu, he was shocked to see that Kakashi was perfectly synchronized with himself. He's moving just like him. And with such perfect timing. Tazuna commented from the sidelines. This guy, my movement is being perfectly, Zabuza thought. Predicted by him, Kakashi finished his thoughts for him. What? He read what I was going to say in my mind. Zabuza thought, a little freaked out. Zabuza, finding that his movements were being copied, formed another different seal to test Kakashi's reaction, but was once again copied. Damn it. This guy has such unpleasant eyes, right? Kakashi interrupted the thoughts, once again angering him even further. Zabuza gritted his teeth in frustration at being copied and perfectly predicted. He eventually scoffed. What you're doing is just copying. Nothing original. You can't beat me, you monkey. You can't beat me, you monkey. Both ninjas finished with the same words. Zabuza, angered once again, began forming a fast chain of hand seals. I'll make it so that you'll never open that copycat mouth of yours again. But before he finished the seals, a figure suddenly appeared next to Kakashi, revealing to be himself. That can't be, Genjutsu. Zabuza thought to himself in shock. Suiten, Daibikufu no Jutsu. Kakashi called out. Having not yet finished his seals, Zabuza cried out in shock. What? A massive tornado of water rushed at Zabuza, pushing him underwater, spiraling backwards. I was the one who tried to execute the technique, but I couldn't keep up with him. Zabuza thought while struggling to resurface from underwater, each time getting pulled back underwater by the jutsu before he could get out of the water to get a breath of air. Zabuza screamed in pain as he was sent crashing through several trees before collapsing against another tree, the water washing away. Several kunai then flew at Zabuza, hitting each of his limbs, making sure he could not run away. Zabuza roared in pain, before leaning against the tree behind him, breathing heavily. This is the end, Kakashi said to him from above on a tree branch. Zabuza looked up tiredly at Kakashi. How? Can you see the future? Yeah, "You're going to die," Kakashi told him with a kunai in his hand, ready to end the Kiri-nin's life. But just as the copy ninja was going to launch his weapon, two Senbon needles flew through the air and embedded itself into Zabuza's neck. Kakashi's widened in surprise and quickly turned in the direction the Senbon originated from. A masked figure stood on a tree branch in a nearby tree. Zabuza collapsed to the ground. The masked figure chuckled lightly and spoke in a cold tone. "It's true. He did die." Kakashi jumped off the tree and crouched down next to Zabuza's body. The Junin lifted his fingers to the neck to check the Kiri Nukenen's pulse. Finding none, he confirmed the nin's death. "He really is dead," Kakashi mumbled to himself before turning his attention to the new arrival. The masked person half bowed to him. "Thank you very much. I was looking for a chance to kill Zabuza. That mask, if I remember correctly, you must be a hunter nin from Kirigakure," Kakashi questioned. The masked person lifted his head from the bow. "You are very well informed." "Yes, I am a member of the ninja unit that hunt missing nin." From his height and voice, he must not be far from Naruto and the other's age. Yet, he's a hunter nin. He's no ordinary kid. Kakashi eyes the hunter nin warily. Naruto watched the hunter nin with narrowed eyes. He had doubts whether Zabuza really was dead. He had been studying the anatomy and pressure points for a few months now. The spot the Senbon hit shouldn't have killed Zabuza. The nin hit an inch or so off from a vital point. It was possible that the hunter nin was fake, and was Zabuza's accomplice. But Naruto stayed silent. His instincts tell him that this person, although young, was easily as strong as Zabuza. Even if he was right, it was best if they could avoid another fight for now. Seeing no hostility from the hunter nin, Kakashi moved slowly towards his team while keeping an eye on the new arrival. The hunter nin shunshined to Zabuza's body and picked it up over his shoulder. "I must go dispose of this corpse. If you'll excuse me." And with that, the hunter nin and Zabuza's body disappeared. Kakashi sighed a breath in relief that the newly arrived Kiri hunter nin was not hostile and covered his Sharingan eye once again with his Hitai 8. Turning to his team, Kakashi commanded the genins that they were to continue the mission. "Our mission hasn't ended yet. We need to take Tazuna-san back to his house." The team nodded in understanding. "Sorry about that, everyone. Just rest at my house," Tazuna offered cheerfully, relieved at having survived another situation where he could have been killed. "All right, let's go," Kakashi ordered, eager to get to their destination so they could rest. Just as he said that, the man collapsed. That's it for part 2 of What If Naruto Gave Up on Sakura. If you're enjoying this alternate timeline, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Naruto What If fanfics. Comment below, who should Naruto grow closer to in this timeline? See you in part 3.